Welcome to AI Agents Hour, brought to you by Mastra. I'm Shane. Abhi might be joining us today, but I'm not sure. He's still traveling around Europe, and I am no longer ever aware if he's showing up or not. So, jokingly, we said last time, maybe we're fighting, but no, we're not. But maybe we are. Anyways, let's get into some of the AI news today. Before we do, let's talk about all the cool things you can see on the bottom of the screen. We're going to be chatting about some of the things happening in AI. I do want to spend a little time playing with Flow and Veo 3 and see what we can come up with together in a few minutes. I learned a little bit from what I struggled with yesterday, and so maybe I can show you some of the things that I created. And I wouldn't say they're necessarily that good as far as I didn't do a great job prompting, but the results are pretty cool. So happy to share that. We got a guest or two from the hackathon that Mastra did last week, the Mastra.build hackathon, talking about their project, what they built, and just showing a demo so we can actually see. We have Jeff coming in from Knock. We're going to talk a little bit about how Knock's thinking about AI and what they are building. We're going to have Allie join and do a little bit of security in AI, talk about what she's seeing, what how we should be thinking about security. I'm not a security expert. That's why I called her in. And then we do have Chris Lee from Launch School coming in to talk a little bit about Launch School, but also just AI and education in general and how he's thinking of either using AI, how AI has been impacting kind of some of the things that they're doing at Launch School. And I do see there's already some comments. Yeah. You're not late. It's live. You're here. So thanks for joining, Abhishek. As you can see, this is live. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on X, if you're watching on LinkedIn, feel free to leave a comment and we will try to answer some of the questions. Can't always get to them all, but we will do our best. And with that, let's dive into some news. I'm just going to share a couple different blog posts and then we're going to look at Google Flow and try to build some videos. And then in about 10 minutes, we'll bring out our guest. So let me share the first thing that we're going to talk about today. I just thought this was kind of interesting because when you have a blog post that says 100 things, that's a lot. So 100 things that we announced at I/O, which is the Google conference. And we're going to go through a few of these, just talk about them, but curious to know your thoughts. So one of the things, ask anything with AI in search. We're not going to watch this video, but I think you can kind of get the idea of what it is. They have a number of items that looks like an improved AI search experience. So you can see just almost a dozen things. New helpful features for Gemini. So they have this quiz feature, camera screen sharing capabilities, agent mode. That sounds interesting. What's that? An experimental feature where you will be able to simply describe your end goal and Gemini can get things done on your behalf. Okay, that sounds cool. I would be interested to see how that works. I'm going to make this a little bigger so hopefully you all can see it. Let's see. I don't know if this is 100 things we announced. I guess it's an announcement. They have over 400 million monthly active users. Don't know why this video is not showing, but they also added Learn LM directly into Gemini 2.5. So Project Mariner's computer use capabilities into the Gemini API. So that's pretty cool. So you can basically in Gemini get it to go do computer use or browser use type things. Thinking budgets. They added AI tools with new options. Okay, so Google AI Ultra. It's a premium subscription. It's $249 a month, 50% off for 3 months. So I will, show you. I have Ultra, just so I could test out Veo 3. I don't know how you pronounce it. Veo. I didn't actually watch the conference. I just been reading about it. So I don't even know how it's pronounced, but it's part of this Ultra plan. So I'll show you some of the stuff that it can do. You probably saw some of it yesterday as we were playing around with it. But it is like that's a pretty expensive plan. So I think they definitely priced out a lot of people, of course, but I imagine that over time, hopefully they'll bring that down or at least make it a little bit more approachable. They have AI Pro, which is $19.99 a month. And this is Flow. That's what we'll go over here in just a little bit, seeing some of the things that we can generate with it. And they announced VO3, which lets you generate video with audio. So yesterday, if you remember, I was building some videos and I never got any audio results. However, today, the interface changed a little bit and it says experimental audio. And I'll show you where it says that. Now, some of my videos, not all of them, but some of them have audio. So I feel like they were either rolling out pieces of it or I wasn't in the right feature flag or something because I wasn't getting audio yesterday, but I am getting audio today. But I know other people, you could see if you're just browsing around X, other people were getting audio. Let's see, they have Image Gen 4. I haven't actually tried that, but now I'm very interested in Image Gen. And future of AI assistants. I'm just scrolling through here. If you had anything that was exciting to you, please drop it in the chat. We can talk about it. I'm just going to scroll through this. There's a lot of things, right? I think the entire idea for the Google I/O conference was just to blitz the market with as many AI releases as they possibly could to just try to be seen as the leaders. And maybe it's working. I don't know. Jules is, again, typically that considered like the Codex, OpenAI Codex competitor, the GitHub agent competitor that was announced. So that's pretty interesting. Has anyone tried Codex, Jules, or the new GitHub agent? I'm curious how anyone's the results. I know internally we've tried Codex and we've had some good results with it, but I don't think it hasn't done everything that we've wanted. But there has been some use cases where it's been pretty cool. I have not tried the GitHub one or Jules yet, so I'm curious. There's almost too many things to keep up with all this stuff. So hopefully you all can help me and we can figure out together which ones are the best for certain use cases. And you can see there's a whole bunch of more AI enhancements. Notebook LMs available in the Play Store and the App Store. That's pretty cool. I do use Notebook LM. Honestly, sometimes, this little hack I like to do. I don't know if anyone else is using Notebook LM, but sometimes with some of these articles or these white papers, I just don't have the time, but I do, whether I'm in the car or whatever, I'll just create it in Notebook LM and then create a podcast and listen to the 10-minute podcast on it. And at least gives me some background. I don't get the full context, of course, of reading the entire white paper, but unfortunately I don't have the time to read every white paper that comes out. I'm sure you don't either. So that works pretty well for me. So we have this GitHub Copilot, meet the new coding agent. That's what we talked about. Again, it was announced a couple days ago. I'm just reiterating it because I do think the use case out of all three, whether it's Jules or OpenAI or GitHub, the one that's most compelling to me is the GitHub one because it's kind of built into the workflow of Mastra as the open source project, right? If we could take some really well written issues from the community and have just send GitHub Copilot on that issue, maybe it doesn't get it right, but maybe it gets it directionally correct, or maybe it can solve some small things if there's like small issues. So I do think that it's kind of built into especially like open source workflows and could be really intriguing for things like that. Of course, I think you have to be using GitHub issues. I know a lot of people aren't. I'm still waiting for the one that connects with Linear and you can send it a Linear issue and it'll get working. I'm sure that exists or will exist soon. But this one is very interesting to me. All right, let's spend a couple minutes and play with Flow. Again, you can see I have the Ultra account. And we had a big release at Mastra yesterday, so I wanted to have a man holding a newspaper that says, Mastra release. The man is yelling, hey everyone, check this out, to a crowd of people walking by on a busy street. And you can see this says experimental audio. if I went to the things yesterday, that did not show up. So something changed for me when I logged in today and I didn't have it yesterday. But hopefully you can all hear this. So kind of funny. I don't know. Kind of scary. The guy's eyes creep me out a little bit, but just seeing that that's AI generated, it's pretty realistic. The guy looks, pretty intense. This one is less good. I don't know. These are just funny to me. Hopefully, you all think that they're funny. Um, we at Mostra today we have our stand up, but we also wanted to say, it's also a handoff between kind of the folks in EU and then the folks in the US time zones. And so someone in our chat said it's a it's not a it's a handoff, not a standoff. And so I made this video in memory of that. So you can see there's some audio there, and I, did the same one, handoff, not a standoff. So as you can see, pretty good though. I mean, I didn't give it really great prompts. I tried. I'm trying to do something with. I want to have trying to use the scene creator to kind of stitch multiple scenes together. I haven't had enough time to really dig into that too much, but I basically want to have. Let's see how this one actually turned out. See if the camera actually zooms around. It doesn't seem like it's really working. Didn't follow exactly what I wanted it to do. But I want to be able to stitch like multiple scenes together with a person sitting at a computer. The camera zooms around behind. You can see what's on their screen. I want to have some kind of. My goal was to have some kind of clever thing where it showed that the person looking at this AI Agents Hour live stream and then get really happy. So that was the goal. We'll see if I can actually pull that off, but haven't had enough time to really dig into it. But you can see it is pretty powerful in what it can do. It doesn't. I would say the prompt adherence is good, but not always great. I guess that's with AI in general. If you do enough iterations, you probably get some better results. This one, at least the camera's moving, but it doesn't really follow where I wanted to kind of swing behind him. I'm sure if I wrote a more detailed prompt, I could get it to listen a little bit better. But anyways, if you are watching this, thanks for joining. We are talking about some AI news. Right now, we're just looking at Google Flow. It's Veo 3. And you can see I didn't even use the right model here, so that's probably why. I wonder if I rerun it with the right quality. My pet peeve, and they do this intentionally, is that if you don't, you have to select the model every single time you run it. As you can see here, it's not selected no matter what. The next time I run it, I have to select it every time. I keep forgetting to do that. They probably want me to waste my credits without using the new model. It's probably intentional, but still some pretty cool results. All right. And with that, if you are tuning in, this is AI Agents Hour. We just chatted through some news. We had a Monster.build hackathon last week. We had over, I think, 350 people register, and then we had over 100 submissions actually that submitted at the end of the week. It was all week long. We, honestly, the judges were overwhelmed. We didn't expect quite that many submissions. We were thinking, we'll probably get 30 to 50, and we got 100. So it was kind of a mad rush as we went through and were judging all these submissions, various quality, right? We had some people that were just getting started building agents with Mastra, and they wanted to submit something. And so they submitted, kind of entry level, like they're just learning, but they were good submissions because they actually got something submitted, and some of those people won prizes. And then we had some that were really, really great in as far as like the level of detail and kind of the full like product sense of what it actually accomplished. And so we did want to bring on a group of people. We have Brandon and Kevin and have them tell us what they worked on last week, a little bit about the product, hopefully show us a demo. And then, if you are watching this and you're in the chat, ask questions along the way, and we will pass them on to them. All right, Brandon and Kevin.
Hey.
Welcome to AI Agents Hour. How are you all doing?
Great.
Good, good. Thanks for having us on, Shay.
Yeah, excited to have you on. Excited to,
Mm.
I was excited when I saw the video of the demo of the product, what you built, the agents that you built, and I know obviously the judges were as well. I didn't get to judge; I was just facilitating, but it would have definitely been on the top of my list as well.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it was obviously hackathons are we had limited time, but it was enjoyable and we tried to make it look nice. So I'm glad others noticed. So
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about, I guess, maybe first the hackathon experience? How did you all break up tasks and how much time did you have to work on it? Because it is virtual hackathons are a little weird in that it's not a set point in time, right? You're like doing your normal living life thing, but also still trying to participate in this hackathon that's going on.
yeah, we invited some friends, and so we came up with kind of an idea. I don't know how we settled on this idea, but it was everybody's like, we hate QuickBooks because a lot of us run small businesses. And so we're like, well, let's just, whip up a little bit of an invoice and see, because that's where everybody was complaining. Even my wife, who does a little bit of the invoicing for my business, she was like, I hate QuickBooks, so so we're like, let's do this, let's run with it. And obviously, like invoicing is, there's a lot of invoicing solutions out there. We wanted to try something different, a different flavor. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we started out with the idea. We had me, Kevin, as the developers, and then we had Kirkwood and Chris, and they're a data analyst and a businessman as well, and they're more our users. So we put them on the list, but they were really just kind of giving us feedback, like what worked, what didn't.
They were your beta testers.
Yes, and we're like, we know how that goes, right? So like, just give us feedback, rapid feedback. So we just whipped up a little Mastra starter, and me and Kevin went to town, right, Kevin?
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe that's the trick. Maybe, not to interrupt Kevin, but maybe that's a trick that other hackathon teams should take into consideration. Invite, you got to have QA. If you want it to be a full project, maybe you need some QA. I think that it showed because there was a good level of polish too. So I imagine they were sending you a bunch of stuff and you were trying to rapidly fix it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin. What were
Yeah,
you gonna
no,
say?
it was great to have them because we could just, iterate really quickly, be like, hey, like try this new version we were just releasing in, and they were like, okay, this is working, this is broken, and they would just constantly be giving it prompts, and we would just, like I said, we didn't have a lot of time, so we're just like, hey, just immediately, like, no wrong answers here, just keep giving us your feedback. The whole time we were just constantly asking them, and then they were giving us like iterations to improve. So yeah, no, it really helped having that kind of be able to have that feedback very quickly in a limited time, because yeah, we didn't even have the idea until our first couple minutes of our discussion, and we all just kind of went on the line and we're like, hey, like we can make invoicing better. And the idea just kind of we all were like, wow, let's go with this, because it was just like everyone agreed, like, we can, there's so much room for improvement of how people do invoicing right now.
And did you come up with that on Monday then?
Yeah. Monday morning, we just had our team and we're like, we have this hackathon. We need to use, Maestra, and we want to showcase that. And we were showing the team, like what Maestra could do and what Copilot Kit. And I think, part of it was one of the examples was that recipe demo where there was like Copilot Kit with Maestra just like had this really powerful experience in that demo. And somebody just mentioned, I think, something about the other day they were creating an invoice, and we're like, well, wait a second, like what if we could just basically talk to your invoice and say, hey, this is what I want to do. And, use the power of agents and LLMs, and, use Copilot Kit to just show like that real-time feedback. And so from that, the idea just was born and we ran with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think the judges liked the fact that it was a well-polished example, but it also, it was, some people brought in examples they had previously started, which we said was fine, but just disclose that, like, how much did you have before? What did you add to it? But it is nice that you kind of had the idea and built it all in the timeline of the hackathon. So I think
Yeah.
that, that it was a extra level of like maybe small bonus points of just, okay, this was like a self-contained, this really felt like a hackathon project because it's not so polished that you were working on it for 2 months, ahead of time. but it's also polished enough where you're like, okay, they put a lot of time and care into it during the hackathon.
Yeah, and it was about Tuesday where we actually started setting up the project, and we probably started coding on Wednesday. So yeah, we had, like obviously we weren't working full time since we have other work full time, but here and there throughout the day we started doing commits and just kind of getting stuff up. We definitely leveraged AI, to help us kind of spin up the UI. Help us make the demo video, different things like that. We try to lean on AI. But obviously we use some of our expertise too and being coders. So, but Mastra, still relatively new to us. So we're still exploring a lot there. Like, we wish we could have done a lot more with like evals and tested things even further, but it's still a hackathon. So.
I don't think a lot of evals were written during the hackathon. If I were to guess, I would guess it was probably 0, but I could be wrong.
Right. Yeah. So
but good to be ambitious though. Good to have the goal. You should get to evals eventually, but yes, I think that for a hackathon, it's maybe hard to get there.
Right. But no, it was great. So we had AI generate this little cute, chameleon branding, and we knew that we wanted to have, something that could adapt to its look, when we started out, and we wanted to have like Maestra kind of guide that experience, so we could. Initially, our idea was like, let's go out and see if AI can grab everything we need from a website and pull in all that information. And we battled with that more on like the MCP server, the Exa AI MCP. It was a little bit finicky in trying to get us the data we needed. And so
I think if we had more time, we definitely could, like our idea, which I think we realized the constraints of the hackathon, so we kind of pivoted, but we kind of initially came up with this idea where you could use an MCP server and basically just throw in a website, and it would literally try to fetch everything, right? It would fetch the addresses and then fetch the logo, but obviously that just needed a lot of refinement to get that working properly. And we realized, like, after spending some time on it, we're like, well, this is conceptually good, but like, can we have this working in the demo by Friday? Probably not. So we still think that that's a great idea, but we also realize hackathons, like, sometimes those constraints are good, so it kind of forced us to be like, hey, this we could do this, but let's make sure we aren't just like going down a rabbit hole that isn't going to show anything. So we kind of give up on that just for the demo of the hackathon.
Yeah, you got to be intentional about the prototype you're building for sure, because you can easily get down a feature that would be great if you had it, but if you can't deliver it, then it's you might as well not have wasted the time. So
right. Yeah. And so anyway, it was fun. And we learned a few things about, like, I think we talked with you a little bit through the week. We're hitting like dev issues, things like that. I know you guys are moving fast, so like version mismatches with Copilot and Maestra. So it was, it did feel like the full developer experience a little bit. Plenty of problems to work through. But no, we had fun. It was, I like, we really do see kind of Maestra as the future of being able to set up this tooling quickly, and then, having Copilot to help us on the UI to tap into that too. It was exactly what we were looking for to test. So,
yeah. I mean, what are the chances we can see a demo?
Yeah, I can show a demo.
I mean, we seeing is believing. People want to know what you won, because you did win. Was it the business category?
Yeah.
That you won, and you won overall too. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. So people want to see, what does a what does a good hackathon application look like after about a week of work with a pretty small team, right?
Yeah. No, I can do a demo on my other screen here. Let me do a screen share.
Yeah, while he's pulling that up, I was going to say a shout out to Maester Cloud. That was awesome to have. We actually tried to do everything in Versal, and we ran into that Versal deployer issue, which I think we talked during the week, and it actually looks like one of the things got fixed. But we already had pushed up to Maester Cloud, and it was just working there, so we ran with it, which was super awesome.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it should be that there was a deployer issue that should be fixed now, but yeah, glad that Cloud worked well. And I don't know if you can zoom a little bit. Just
let me see.
Maybe make it a
Yeah.
little, there you go, just because it is kind of tough to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. Let me blow up my window a little bit here. And then, yeah, let me click get started here. So, can you see that okay? Or do I need to zoom in a little
I would
more?
zoom. I always one more click more than you're comfortable with. That's what I like
Uh,
to tell people, because
okay.
it's always a
Yeah.
little smaller when you seem like you're watching it through the video. But yeah, that
Right.
looks
Right.
pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, so this is this is the agentic. We realize agentic is kind of the power of AI being able to show its purpose for a business case. And so this is Chameleon Invoice. So we generated just this basic invoice, and this is really targeted. Our idea with this is very much to target this at people on the go. So we have big ambitions for it, like being able to do voice prompting. And other things for it. But just to start out with, because Copilot supported text-based chats, you basically just chat with your invoice, right? So there's no controls on the left. That was intentional. We could have had that done, but we really wanted to lean in on the AI and see what it was capable of doing. And so yeah. Anyway. How can I help you build and style your invoice? And so in our demo, we're kind of showing, you can just paste in a lot of the information just to speed this up. But like if I say, update my company name, address, and contact info. Of course, there's going to be a developer error, right? Let's see.
It's not a live demo unless something's broken.
Are you
Right.
using the live site or local? You could just use the live
Yeah.
site if there's a key
Let me
issue,
see.
right? API issue.
Oh man, it was literally working before I got on the network. That was crazy.
Is this the Versal hosted version?
No, this is localhost. All right.
Switch to
What's
Versal,
the?
the Versal.
Yeah, it's I think it's what, Chameleon.
I'll give you the link here if
I,
you can.
I got it. I got it here. I got
That
it.
one will work.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let me reset and refresh here. There we go. Let's see if this one's working. Tools available. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And can you give a couple clicks of zoom?
Oh yeah. I got to zoom in on this one, huh? There we go. Right there.
There you go.
It's nice and large. Okay, so obviously you can kind of ask what tools are available, and it'll list out. This doesn't look as pretty zoomed in, but you get the idea. So like if I say update my company, name, address, and contact info, and then it will ask about the details. And we use this really awesome bike company that's local to me and Kevin, Bicycle Collective. So if I paste that in, you can see it updates on the left over here. And it's pretty crazy because even though I pasted all that information in, there's multiple hooks into like updating specific fields. And so the AI does a really good job at knowing to call each of those Copilot renders and trigger each of those. So, but it all updates seamlessly. So I assume there's some type of queuing, or it queues those up. Yeah, you can update, your invoice number, update invoice number to, 3, and there you go. So there's a lot you can do. Obviously we kind of showed. Now let's add a logo. So this is what's really cool is you can have components in chat. So that's kind of your way of getting input, from the customer. So if I kind of find the logo for this, I think it was right here, Bicycle Collective. So it will just, upload the logo for you. Now, if, we knew we wanted to kind of visually step them down the screen. So the next thing is let's add a new customer. And then it'll ask for the information. So I'll paste myself in here just to speed this up because that's what we were using for the demo. Yeah, it'll just, it can kind of do a confirmation for you. There's a lot of stuff we did like popping up like confirmation to delete things and stuff we didn't show in the demo, but we implemented a lot of that as well. And so, yeah, there you go. Assigned. And then finally, the cool stuff is, having the product list. It's able to kind of decipher like dropped in spreadsheets, or I don't even have to do a spreadsheet though. I can say, add the following products: bike tires, water bottle, um, uh, and then maybe like uh, some type of service, like chain service or something. And it will kind of do a pretty good job at picking up that, even if you're not pasting anything in, or you can just update the bike tires to 4. So and it will kind of somewhat figure out what you're talking about. I didn't say quantity there, but it knows, the AI is able to pick up like, oh, you want 4 of these things now. So we thought that was pretty cool, even though we were doing a lot of like, well, there's a lot of ways to describe a product. Some people call it items, some part numbers, things like that. How do we deal with that? And so it's pretty good about picking up that kind of stuff. And then, of course, update the price of those tires to $100 a piece, and it just calculates it, so you can kind of see it's pretty cool. I like, to me, this is like breaking out of the chat prompt. This is the agentic feel that I wanted to get out of this. And then finally, like, if we eventually wanted to do full on theming, but we didn't have time for it. But like, if you wanted to like update the brand color to dark red, and then it will change that, and then you can do update background color to purple, if you're into that. So, there's a lot of like customization you think you can kind of get into. And then we didn't quite have time to hook up when we did the hackathon, the resend. We were going to have it so you could just have it send out this invoice, to whoever you put in here for a customer. So
yeah, I could totally see this, ultimately. On the one hand, I could argue it's easier for you to maybe click and add it manually.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I could see if you had this chat plus like a voice interface where you could just like talk through and like, hey, we need to like, oh, this is for Brandon. Here's some products. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, we need to update this, the quantity here, update that price. Like, kind of real natural language. You could probably do that much faster. And this is, I think what, being in the room with the judges, one of the things that when they watch the demo, that the fact that you had, well, we call this like client side tools, but I don't know what the technical term, but the idea that the agent is making a decision that then impacts the browser, right? It's changing the color of the, so it's like immediately like interacting with the interface. And then you have the nice like suspend and wait for feedback. And do you want to continue? Those types of things like extend beyond just like the basic chat, which is everyone's seen is pretty good, right? But now it's okay. This is like an extra level of polish on top of just a chat interface, but it's also like it feels like a pretty good and intuitive way to kind of interact with some of this stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were going for, right? Is we wanted the UI piece, but then there's obviously a lot we can do on the back end as well.
We didn't completely get enough time to like go into workflows, but it would be really awesome to dig into workflows a little more. We kind of started on it, but have workflows basically kind of go through. Like, our idea was to take a website and determine like, hey, is there enough information from this web URL to like fill it out? If not, we'll prompt for the missing information and sort of have that branching on workflows. And then, we really did want to have voice. We just were realistic about our time frame. So, ultimately as a product, it would be awesome to, like you mentioned, you kind of hit the nail on the head of just like, hey, talk to your invoice and in natural language. You can see already how powerful it is, but that's the last step is like you talk to it and see the visual updates. So, you're kind of grounded in that truth of like, the LLM's not hallucinating. If you can see it, that it's like updating what exactly you said right there from these actions.
Yeah, that feedback loop's like important. And to your point, Shane, is, the way we imagined it is having this as kind of a mobile app, because we've heard from some people already that are like, we could use this. And basically they're out in like a construction field and they're like, oh, my customer needs an invoice. I should just, open up this and talk into it, tell it a few things, and then it generates it, right? So, and it doesn't, you don't have to learn how to use the interface. So I think this kind of concept's really good for people who don't know how to use, sophisticated, QuickBooks invoicing tools, but they want something quick and something they know that they can do, which is natural language, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I could see, there's a lot you could add to that over time around just like helping people with their invoicing or estimates. It's like,
Yep.
if I'm going in to paint a house, here's the dimensions of the room. What's the square footage? Oh, because the AI could probably calculate that pretty reasonably well. And then if you had a price somewhere, or that you had something in its memories of like what your price per square foot is, some
Yeah.
settings somewhere, you could be like, oh, it'll just calculate the price for you.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah. There's a lot here there's a lot you could take this,
yeah.
a lot of directions. So,
So
but
what
yeah,
is
this,
so what is the next steps? Is this thing live? That was, Abhishek in the chat wants to know, is your app online? Is it available yet? If not, what's the ETA, and are you coming back on the live stream to launch it?
We've been getting a lot of good feedback. People are like kind of seeing this agentic feel for this. So we're really trying to gauge interest. If there's like enough people that, there's enough businesses out there that think this would be a good idea. So what we did was we put just an interest list if somebody wants to come out here and just sign up to this. It's Ambition.
And how do they get to that?
Ambition.kit.com.
Okay. Yeah. If you send me in the private chat, I'll post it on the screen so people can see it written.
Yeah, let me do that now. So, the idea is we really want to know if people are interested, and if there's enough people interested in it, then we'll probably commit some more developer hours to it. But it was a hackathon, so we were just trying to do something fun. But I think if there's enough interest, we'll happily pursue it as a business opportunity, I guess I should say. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you, Brandon and Kevin, coming on, showing us a little bit about what you built, talking us through the process, talking us through the hackathon. Always great to see just all the cool things that were built during that week. Any parting words before you sign off?
Thanks for putting that on. Like I said, I think it was a great, sometimes it's good to, have constraints, and hackathon's always fun because they force you to, sometimes those arbitrary constraints are actually, in the moment they're stressful, but at the end it's like, it's kind of fun to bring together a, wide range of talent, and it's just a fun opportunity. So thanks for putting that on. And I think the thing is just all these, really awesome tools and companies built around also open protocols, right? So MCP is huge, and then Copilot Kit with AGUI, like seeing all these pieces fit together and you guys working with them is just, it's just really exciting, and it's only going to get better. So we're really excited for what you guys are doing and what's coming even in the future with like, more workflows and the stuff you're working on. So it's definitely an exciting time.
Yeah. I can echo that. And I just say, we're, obviously AI is taking over the world. So we're excited to see where Master takes that. And, I've got thanks for the book as well. I got to catch up on Sam's book here. So this weekend. Yeah, you got it too. Nice. So
we are not officially sponsored. Like to say we're independent media here, but if we were sponsored, it would be by my co-founder Sam's book.
Yeah.
You can get the free digital copy if you're interested.
Nice. Okay. Nice. Well, thanks for having us on.
Yeah. Thanks. Awesome. Thanks for coming on. Yeah. And we'll chat with you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks. Later. Enjoy.
All right, everyone. Well, that was fun. We got to see a little bit, behind the veil of Hackathon, Chameleon Invoice, the overall winner and the winner of the business category of the Master.build Hackathon last week. If you are just joining us, this is AI Agents Hour. I'm Shane from Mastra. We talked about some AI news. We looked at VO3 and generated some funny, interesting videos. We talked with a hackathon guest from last week, and now we're bringing on another guest. We're bringing on Jeff from Knock. So, Jeff, how's it going?
Hey, Shane, it's going great. How are you?
I am doing well. Yeah, it's been a fun week, and it obviously got a jam-packed show today. A lot of good things.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, you're doing some great stuff out there. We really appreciate all the content. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I mean, also don't know how, it's a lot of content, so I don't think many people consume all of it. But if you're consuming this part, thanks for watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, how should we kick this off? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe just I'd be great to know a little bit of background. So, candidly, we have never really met. So, right. So tell me a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Knock, and
Yeah, for
then
sure.
would love to talk about how you're thinking about AI and using AI within Knock. Once we kind of get the baseline, for the viewers watching, tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
yourself. and
So,
Knock.
so obviously Jeff Everhart, that's my name. You see it down in the left-hand corner, hopefully. I work at Knock as a part of the developer relations team, and Knock is an infrastructure platform for sending transactional and promotional messaging. And so, our idea is actually very like, we use the term workflows. I think workflows in tech tends to be a very overloaded term now, but we're built around this idea of stitching together all of these different messaging channels like email, SMS, push, in-app notifications, all of your different chat providers like Slack and Discord, and allowing you to orchestrate those in a really thoughtful and intelligent way. And basically, like the way I like to describe Knock is we're kind of like the microservice, like the best microservice you could have built if you were trying to build a notification subsystem that you could have built in house. And we've kind of got all of the bells and whistles there. We've got really like deep observability. So we're backed basically by ClickHouse logs. So you can look at every downstream request to like resend or AWS SES or Slack, and kind of examine, what was the result of that? What did they send back? We handle normalizing all of the sending and engagement data across all of those channels. So you can kind of get a single pane of glass when you look at, are things being delivered? Are they being opened? Are people clicking on links? And then we also provide a lot of out-of-the-box components for people to just get started shipping faster with certain types of notification experiences. So like an in-app feed. We also provide some components to help you bootstrap a Slack integration a lot faster. And so one of the things that we realized is like part of the reason that Knock exists is that our co-founders, Sam and Chris, worked for a while at a company called Frame.io. It was a large video collaboration platform. So they're like really in the trenches of building.
I don't know how I know Frame, but I've definitely been on their website and know of Frame. So I've heard.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And so they were deep in the trenches of building this really intricate notification system for a collaboration app, and learned all these lessons and sort of spun those ideas out into their own product.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so I am kind of curious. So I guess how long you been there?
Going on 2 years in December. We're kind of a fairly youngish company, maybe I think 4 years we've been in existence, and then I think only live for about 3.
Okay. Yeah. And are you, I know you've kind of talked to me a little bit, but you're exploring some things around the AI space? So what are you been
so
thinking about? What
obviously,
have you been doing?
yeah. So it really, it's really timely because like I got to watch your guests right before this sort of talk about the application that they built for the hackathon, and eventually they mentioned, hey, we wanted to maybe send this invoice via email. And so kind of the way that we're approaching this is that agents obviously are going to be communicating with humans a lot more, and I think the patterns that they're going to use to do that are sort of still up in the air. And our idea is that we don't really want to just say, hey, agent, like go out, send this email to this person in a one-off way. Like, so how do we provide patterns or templates or guardrails for some of those agents who are going to be communicating with them? And then also at the same time, how do we tie that agent to user communication into the rest of the communication that you might be sending to users? So like, that's one of the things we talk with customers a lot about. Is like, how does transactional, promotional, and now like agentic messaging all fit in? Like, how many messages are users getting? If they have preferences systems, how do all these things work together? So that's definitely sort of how we're thinking about it. And a couple of weeks ago, we actually launched our own sort of agent toolkit that it taps into the different agent frameworks that the community has created. And Mostra was actually sort of like next on our list to develop an integration with. So kind of why I wanted to reach out and just kind of get to know y'all and, I don't know, share what we're doing and maybe get some insights back from you all on like how you all see agent to user communication working and like where we could be most helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I think you did kind of hit the nail on the head that agents are going to be interacting on people, humans' behalf a lot more, in the future, right? They already are to some extent, but at some point I could totally see, notifications, emails coming from my agent rather than me directly, right? And I think now how we actually do that, I think, is a little up in the air. I think that's why that you're kind of thinking through that problem
exactly.
is how do you make sure that it is done safely? Because the one thing I've always had this, I wanted to build like a simple AI email client because I'm terrible at email, but I don't want it to send messages for me. So I would want it to, maybe it can create a draft, it can ask my opinion, but there's like some guardrails, right, of what I do want it to be able to do. And so I think that is a challenge that I don't know if anyone's necessarily solved yet. So it's probably a good challenge for you to be digging into. As far as like how do you integrate with Mostra, I think we definitely want to make that happen because people are building these, as you just saw from the last hackathon. They need integration with some messaging services and notifications. They talked about doing an app, so like in-app notifications are important. There's tons of like feedback where agents might be triggering these kinds of like messages between users or sending messages to other agents that then respond on behalf of the users. There's a whole bunch of things I could see that people are going to be building in the near future with Mostra agents and needing to kind of connect these things together.
Yeah. And that's definitely like aligned with our vision, right? It's just Knock becomes this integration layer for all of those different downstream providers. And like, so we have a number of different SDKs, and like going back to the mobile use case you mentioned, a bunch of our mobile SDKs sort of bootstrap you in like acquiring a push token and just handle a bunch of that plumbing work out of the box for you. So it gets you farther faster. And then, just figuring out how, I don't know, a lot of it I think is still up in the air. And we're definitely in the place where we're looking for design partners and feedback from the community about, hey, here's what I want this to look like. And, we will go and figure out what kinds of solutions we need to build for that. And obviously I know that Mostra also like has some MCP utilities. And
that was my next question I was going to ask you.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of the cool part and why I think Knock is like really well suited to take on this space, because like there are a number of other, I'll say like cross channel messaging providers out there. A lot of them are really focused on like the marketing community, but at Knock, we really want to be developer first. And so like, I say all the time that our value is in our abstractions. And so it feels like something you would have built, if you like had all this time to build a really nice abstraction around a notification system. And so like the benefit obviously then of just being this really nice collection of abstractions is that it exposes that really well to AI agents, either through MCP or sort of directly as tool calling. So we did, as a part of that agent toolkit, release an MCP server. And this has been really great because it just like, we've just watched people's workflows get even faster. So like if Knock was already helping you accelerate whatever system development stuff you needed to do, the MCP obviously just puts that on steroids. And so you can come in and say, all right, hey, here's this React email. I want you to turn this into, this amount of partials and create me this email step in a workflow. And it'll just do all that or migrate you from SendGrid to, our sort of agnostic templating layer. And so that's one of those really cool things. And then the secondary piece of that is with the agent toolkit. Like, obviously we expose a bunch of our management API, which is like basically like, I want to operate on all of the things in my Knock dashboard. So that's sort of the primary use case of the MCP server. But then the individual workflows, we can also annotate, provide descriptions for those, and then expose those as individual tools to agents so that they sort of know when to invoke specific communication workflows. And then inside those workflows, we can kind of like escalate, right? So I could send to one channel, and then because Knock normalizes all of the data, we could say, all right, I'm going to send an in-app message, and then I'm going to wait for 30 minutes. And if that hasn't been seen, then I'm going to escalate to Slack or escalate to email or escalate somewhere else. And you can, just like really do these thoughtful patterns that I think is hard for people to do otherwise. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited to see what people build with this stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like, we only have so much time today, but
Yeah,
next time we should try to wire up a master
definitely.
agent using the MCP server, use the MCP client and a master agent and give it some tools and see if we can get an agent to start sending some notifications
Yeah,
for us.
absolutely. We should definitely do that.
So
Yeah, that's something.
So we know we're going to need maybe a little more time than we have today, but I think
Yeah.
that's the next step is let people are going to want to see this thing in action, because even like I said, the last guests that were on, they needed email notifications, and there's different types of ways to wire this stuff up. And if we can have real code examples where someone can download and play with it and get up and running, as you said, get further faster.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is definitely on my to-do list, and I already sort of browsed through the docs, and I don't think it will be really much of a lift at all. Your all's tool calling integration looks very similar to kind of like everything else out there, so I think it should be pretty straightforward.
I do think if we had 5 minutes, 5 more, I think we could do it in 10 minutes. We maybe can't do it in 5, but
okay.
I think we, but you got to think about like the authentication and signing up and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But assuming you were already set up, building a master agent and giving it an MCP, some tools from MCP, that's like a 5-minute job. That's how.
Well, so, I will time myself on my own, and I'll post the results on Twitter.
Yeah, let me know. And speaking of that, is that the best place for people to follow you?
That is definitely the best place for people to follow me. I know you dropped the knock.app link already, but that's a great place to check out. And we have a landing page specifically for Agent Toolkit if you're looking for that. And then also the docs are always a great place to go for just code examples.
All right, let's look at this. I have not looked at this landing page for Agent Toolkit. So now, can we look at it right now?
Oh, together? Yeah, absolutely. Let's pull it up. That might have helped. Because visualizing the workflows, I guess.
I always like to just pull things up and
let's go.
Get your hot take on it. All right.
Yeah. So if you scroll down, I think that's probably sort of the best example. And you can kind of see there over on the left, like what a knock workflow looks like. And we have these different nodes, and they can either be channels or we have these logical function steps. So like we do things like batching, delays, throttles, just depending on your use case. We can incorporate some of those things, and then they're all aware of one another. So all of the steps in a workflow can reference the result or the interaction status of another step. And then, we expose those as tools to the LLM, and it chooses when to call them and when not to. And I sort of think just like part of the benefit here, we talk about the idea of just there being like a single pane of glass a lot, and observability, right? Because like, I think that's part of the problem with agents, especially like I haven't really dug in that much to Master Cloud, but like we've been looking at kind of like Cloudflare and their like durable object model where you might have a bunch of these different agents spun up that's all specific to a user. And so like, how do you handle logging and, observability into these emails when that's the case? And kind of Knock just provides all that just as a matter of course, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, your workflows look familiar from what I've seen too, from what we do in Master. So it's definitely a pattern that people are looking for. And the whole how to scale and how to really connect these things when you have all these different agents running out, virtually in these cloud providers is something that a lot of people struggle with as well.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, I want to say thanks. It was nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess officially meeting with you. And when we next time, let's actually dig into some code and let's get a master agent sending some knock agents or triggering some workflows and share that code with the people watching. But appreciate you joining today.
That sounds great. Happy to come back. Really appreciate you having me.
All right. We'll see you, Jeff. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching AI Agents Hour. We're about almost an hour in, but we still have 2 more guests that are going to be coming on here pretty soon. We're going to have Allie come in and talk about some AI security. And then we're going to have Chris from Launch School come in and talk about, I'm going to ask questions around AI in education, learn a little bit about Launch School and what they're thinking. and doing around AI. But if you are just joining us, we already did talk a little bit about some AI news, some things that happened at Google I/O. We did talk or show a little bit around Google Flow and the VO3 model around building videos, creating videos, kind of this new video generation model. If you want to see a video get created, drop it in the chat wherever you're watching this, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on X, whether you're on LinkedIn, and I will run it through VO3 and we will just see what happens. So I'll pick one or two examples if we do get some messages sent in the chat of what kind of video you'd like to create. So just give me the prompt and I will copy paste that thing in and we will see if we get some fun results. So yeah, I'll give you all some time to do that. But definitely was excited to learn a little bit more about Knock and some of the stuff that they're doing with their agent tools, and specifically around how to wire up messaging and notifications into AI agents. And if you are, is this the first time you're watching, make sure you can follow me here, SM Thomas 3 on X. If you haven't checked out Mostra yet, you can go to mostra.ai. I already mentioned this once, but if you want a copy of Principles of Building AI Agents written by my co-founder Sam, you can go to mostra.ai/book. And with that, let's check in and see where we should have another guest here coming on shortly. But I am also curious, if you're watching in the chat, is there anything specifically you've been building with AI tools, AI agents? What have you been working on? What have you been challenged with? What are some of the roadblocks you've been hitting? I know for me, as exciting as all of these tools are around AI agents, there's still a lot of quality issues that I'm still running into on a day-to-day basis. So earlier this week on Monday, I was showing this coloring book example, not coloring book, a storybook example that I had built. And the power is amazing compared to what it was a year ago of what you can do. But I think, and maybe we're getting greedy as the models get better. The bar of what we need keeps moving because it's still it feels like, okay, it's great, but it's not quite good enough yet for what I really want to accomplish. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge for me is ensuring relatively consistent quality. It doesn't always have to be 100% perfect, but that 4 nines, 99.99% of the time, you want the result that you'd expect if you gave it to a very smart human. And sometimes it's 95% or 90%, and that isn't always good enough. So I think that's one of the challenges. It's why evals are something I think that's underappreciated in building AI applications. A lot of people are just building prototypes and trying to get something out there, which is probably a good first step. But eventually, I do think that evals become even more important. But on top of that, another thing that's important, security. Definitely have to care about what you're doing in AI, and there's like different security vectors that are kind of opened up now that we're less deterministic than we used to be. And so with that, we do want to have this week's security corner. So I'm bringing on my friend Allie here, and we're gonna see what she has for us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Shane. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back.
Yes, it's not the inaugural anymore. It's our second security corner.
Yeah, we get to do it again. We get to learn a little bit about, AI security, talk through what, some of the things you're seeing, some of the concerns you have, I guess, with how AI applications interact with the world. And obviously that causes, some potential issues.
Yeah, definitely. I guess to start, I'll just talk about what's at the top of mind for me. This week, I don't know if anyone else noticed it, but I think Fortnite and 11 Labs and Gemini collaborated to bring a Darth Vader NPC into Fortnite, that's powered by just a voice agent.
I did see that. I thought that was, my first impression was, this is really cool. And then I was like, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. When I first saw it, I was like, is this going to be the next kind of Microsoft Tay chatbot from 2016 that said all sorts of bad things and just got progressively worse over time? But we're actually seeing Darth Vader improve and get a lot better. And the team's able to ship hot fixes and they're working, which is really cool to see, like, the improvement from 2016 to now, which is obviously like, a long time ago, like, practically like 10 years ago. So it's great that we're improving. So I actually we did a X Space last week to talk about it, but we just filmed an Insecure Agents podcast #2 this morning to continue the conversation with one of the lead researchers from Zenity that was able to add a lot of like the technical content behind, like, how do you actually jailbreak a voice agent, what goes into that. So it's really interesting discussion. I'm excited to like share more about that soon. But yeah, definitely like AI security, like runtime has really, those solutions have really been, I think, integral to allowing us to create voice agents like Darth Vader that can iteratively improve and not like get worse. Because like I think the difference between Vader and Tay was like that chatbot that Microsoft released that went kind of bad 10 years ago was that Tay was continuously training on the data and the prompts that the users were giving it, and they were giving it horrible, like saying horrible things to Tay, so it just kind of got worse. But Vader's not training on its own data, and it's also using probably some sort of input-output filtering to be able to say, okay, like, this is a bad prompt, like I don't want to answer this anymore. So that's
Yeah.
probably how they're shipping hot fixes.
Yeah, and I'm really curious on how they do that because voice agents are incredibly latency sensitive, right? And so and I've seen some different approaches for how you create guardrails into these, into these agents where you basically have to run you're filtering on certain things, maybe algorithmically, and then you're also like maybe running some things through some kind of really super lightweight LLM while it's coming up with a response, so it can basically interrupt it mid, while it's processing. So it's like, because latency is incredibly important, so you have to architect it in a very specific way. So it is interesting to see, like, be interesting to know more about how they actually added that kind of input output filtering and those guardrails kind of into the flow of just talking to a Darth Vader, bot in a game.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. We were imagining this morning that like maybe they had some sort of input output filtering on the prompt, like after it goes through the speech to text, like at that layer before it hits Gemini, they would have that there, and then after it hits Gemini and then gets returned basically all the way to Vader to say something about it, you would check the output there as well. So there's probably like 2 instances of this happening. To your point, which is incredible for latency, that it's able to do it that quickly. I remember I did this AI security like vendor landscape report with Francis Odom back in February, and we looked at some of these runtime products, and the way that they integrate themselves into these AI application stacks is all very different. Like sometimes they'll be like sitting really close to the LLMs themselves and sort of like acting as an LLM firewall with like API layers, where you just put every like prompt that comes in like through an extra API call. Or you put it at the network layer, or you can put it even as low as like the OS layer, using like eBPF solutions, which is incredibly fast, like lower latency, but also is like pretty tricky. Like that's why we had the CrowdStrike like blue screen of death in the airports like a year ago, because they like made like a bad software update and it just like crashed the OS. So it's pretty, can be risky to like include that there. So I don't know, lots happening, lots of different solutions out there, but really neat that we saw Vader improve, I guess.
Yeah, I've always been, and a lot of us on the team have been talking about what are going to be the first breakouts of AI agents in gaming, right? Because I do think it's something that everyone's always I don't play a ton of games anymore, but I used to play a lot of Final Fantasy when I was a kid. And so the idea of like these role-playing games where you have all these, non-player characters that could have their own stories and you could actually like build upon the story of the game in much more meaningful ways has always been something I've thought about, just liking RPG games. And so I do think that that's a unique aspect of potentially bringing in lightweight models into those, into those games. I think there's, of course, like cost is of course a factor in why probably a lot of these haven't done this yet, cost and latency, of course. But I do think we're going to see more and more really interesting gaming use cases for AI agents and just like the LLMs in general.
I agree. Do you want me to show the agent that I have this week to go over?
Yeah, let's dig in. Let's start talking about it. And yeah, let's see what we got this week. we always like to look at code around here. So anything we can do to take a look at some actual code.
Awesome. So this is my example for this week is pretty similar to last week. If you were here last week for the first security corner, it's a very similar architecture setup, except for we have 3 MCP servers that those agents connected to, not just one.
Can you give us like 3 clicks of zoom?
Oh, yes.
Maybe one more. The diagram
more.
is a little, there we go. Hopefully that looks good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is very similar. It's like it's got 3 different MCP servers it's connected to, and just to set the stage, this is a like a bike maintenance agent. I don't know if anyone else here is a cyclist, but so the Global Cycling Network has like the very best YouTube videos for how to do like bike maintenance, clean your bike, change a bike tire, like anything you need to learn. Like their YouTube videos are just like, you know, those YouTube videos that are just super, super old. They were made like 25 years ago, but they're just amazing. And they have so many views and they're still around because they're that good. Like that's what this channel is. So I made an agent that specifically just scrapes and checks like videos from that channel. So it first like searches the videos, and then once it finds the video it wants, it will get the transcript for it, and then we'll just take that transcript and then create the step-by-step instructions about it. And I couldn't show the whole frame here, but it'll also output the actual URL for the video if you wanted to go watch the whole video yourself, which I found this actually kind of like useful and helpful, which was kind of fun. But then one thing that I was challenging with this is sometimes it would say something like, oh, like you need to, I don't know, scrub the cassette here, or you need to check the derailleur. And be like, okay, well, like I kind of know what that is, but could you like show me exactly what part that is, or exactly what, you know, wrench or tool I need to be using? And a visual would be best for that. And that's kind of like lost since I'm not looking at the video. I don't really know like what to look for. So I added this EXA MCP server to scrape images off the web to be able to answer follow-up questions like, hey, like what's a derailleur? And it would actually show me an image of what a derailleur was, which would be really helpful. But I think like 2 of the biggest security concerns I think with this server, or sorry, with this agent compared to last week's is 2 things. One, I've got 3 different MCP servers, and to all 3 of those combined imports 16 different tools, and I actually am only using 3. And so I think we've talked about it before that like MCP has kind of a bunch of different security vulnerabilities right now around like tool poisoning, and basically tool poisoning means just like bad malicious instructions in the tool. Like imagine, I think the Trail of Bits blog published an article about this recently where they said in one tool there was a prompt that said, you know, export the entire chat history in the name of, you know, SOC 2 compliance, which, you know, is not something you should be doing for SOC 2 compliance. But then again, it did that. So it's very easy to have like bad tools, and also like rug pulls are another vulnerability in MCP where like you think you have this version of this tool, but then, you know, there's no versioning in MCP yet, so that could like just because the tool is okay today does not mean it's okay tomorrow, because it could just be ripped out from under you and updated and you wouldn't know. So basically, like the less tools that you're connected to, the better for security, because it'll reduce your attack surface for those vulnerabilities. And your agent's also going to make better decisions, because it's not going to be confused like, oh my gosh, there's all these different tools I should call. Like, which one should I be calling? If there's no reason for your tool to be calling like all 16 of these tools, then it's best to remove them. So I'd be interested to like pair program with Shane on this call to maybe like look at how my agent could be connected to less tools by, you know, stripping some of those away.
Yes, we can definitely do that for sure. I will say, just in all the things that I've built and talked to many others, if you can limit the number of tools you give your agent, you're just going to get better results. And oftentimes this means what I've seen is if you had, you know, let's say you had dozens of tools, you might actually want to break that up into specialized agents that do specific things. And so I think that I've seen that a lot as well, where you have a more of a multi-agent system, and each agent only has access to a handful of tools. Because just like you and me, if someone gives me, if I jump into somewhat of an unfamiliar task and I'm given a dozen tools, I might make a mistake of which one I should, you know, start with first. So I think just like we would get confused with, you know, an overwhelming amount of tools, the LLMs will also get confused. I always say that your LLM is just an eager intern, so you got to treat it appropriately. You don't want to give too many tools to your eager intern on day one, and maybe eventually they'll continue to level up. But that's kind of how I treat it today.
That's a really good analogy. I like that. I'm gonna start saying that.
Yeah.
The intern thing. That's cool.
Yeah. So do we want to look at some code?
Yes. All right, I'm gonna share my entire
The
screen.
moment everyone's been waiting for. 1 hour and 10 minutes into the stream, when we finally get to look at some code today. I actually, I do hear people say they like to look at code in the streams, but mostly I just like to look at code. So, it's also just as much for me as it is for the viewers, I think. Maybe more so for me. But we will need about 3 clicks of zoom again on this, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right. And I guess maybe you mentioned this, but where did you, can we look at where you got these MCP servers from?
Yes, that's a great question. So I got them from Smithery, and every time I get an MCP server from Smithery, I look at the information for security down here. This is a scan from Invariant Labs that will scan for things like rug pulls or tool poisoning. So this one says it's secure, so that's another reason why I use this one. So I use the Exa search one. I'm using just this tool, not any of the others. And then I'm using the YouTube MCP server here, and I'm just using search videos. I forget why I didn't use Git transcripts here also. I think either it wasn't working or I just didn't realize that it had this. But I'm also using this other random YouTube transcript server just for the Git transcripts tool.
Yeah, it's funny because I was building an MCP server that could use some of the tools from these MCP servers within it. So now I am going to, if you watched yesterday when we were building or maybe it was 2 days ago, when we were building the MCP server that would list all the YouTube videos for the live streams and tell you if there's an active YouTube video, for any of those that are watching, now I have more ideas for how to continue making that better. So anyways, let's continue.
Awesome. So yeah, I have all those 3 different MCP servers, and here's the tools that I'm using, but I don't know TypeScript that well. So yeah, it'd be awesome if there's a way to, instead of, awaiting and getting all of these different tools, which is what I'm doing down here, is me feeding all of the tools from every single MCP server into this bike maintenance agent. If we could just strip those other extra tools away somehow, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think, that seems like it should be doable. If you just go back down, maybe it'd actually be good. Can we show the before and after? Can you pull up the local development playground and we can see that it has all 16 tools? You can see on the right there's a bunch of tools over there. Okay, so now let's limit it so we only have 3 tools showing up here. Okay, so we should be able to just delete everything in that tools line. And then we want to open an object. So open bracket. And then in there, let's just type search, whatever search videos. And then let's do a close bracket in there and just save it and see if you'll need a comma. Yeah. Let's just make sure that works. You should only have 1 tool now. If we go back to the dev server, we might have to restart it.
Oh, maybe it's coming back to life here. Oh, yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah. We had to restart the MCP. Okay. No tools. Well, that's not what I would expect to see.
I guess search videos. This is the reference for search videos. I'm not sure if I did this right.
Yeah, but that looks correct to me. Is that what it's called? Search videos? Do you know?
I'm pretty sure. Let's double check.
Let's just, we can hopefully debug this. If we go back down and we go to line 98, let's change that const search videos to just call it const YouTube or something and take the brackets out around it. And then let's just go align. I don't know if we need that, but let's just go align. Yeah, you can add it there and just add, it'd be ... YouTube. So we're basically going to spread all the tools out. And now we should only get all the YouTube videos tools from that MCP server. So let's let the MCP server connections work. Basically has to connect to all three of those MCP servers to get a connection. All right, should be good. Okay,
Oh, cool.
so that let's copy over the name, because I think you will need that whole thing, I believe, because it's based on the way it creates that tool name is from, if we go back to your code and you scroll up, whatever you give it in the MCP client as the key. So if you scroll up, you must have one that's called YouTube, right? Oh, no, it's YouTube.
No, you're right.
So that appends that to the beginning of the tool. So it knows what server the tool came from. So if we go down to where you get this YouTube variable and we're waiting the tools. Now let's change this back and paste in that YouTube _ search videos and then wrap that in brackets, and that should all work. We'll need brackets around it. And that just pulls out the individual tool from that get tools. So for those of you that are not that familiar with TypeScript, this stuff kind of seems confusing if you're coming from a Python background or whatever. A lot of you are probably like, oh, like this is easy, but because you've been doing it for a decade like me. But if you are waiting something, you're getting an object back, you can basically get an individual property or value from that object. In this case, we're getting the YouTube _ search videos one, we're saving it in a variable, and then we're just passing that individual tool to our agent down below. So let's update that. And we don't need those 3 dots, which is called the spread operator, which will spread an object out, like basically take all the properties and just insert it all there. So in this case, we're just passing one individual tool into our agent. So now if we save it, that should work. And then we'll do the same thing with those other tools. And hopefully we are slightly more secure now than we were before we started. And for those of you that are just joining us, we are talking security with Allie. We've gone through some AI news. We had a guest from our last hackathon. We talked with Jeff from Knock. If you're watching this live, please drop us a comment if you have questions along the way. I'm still waiting for some more ideas for what videos to generate between Allie and the next guest that we're bringing on using VO3 from Google. We're going to generate a couple videos. All right, so we're adding those next tools. So now we should have, and you just it'll be inside that object. Yes. And hopefully now we save it and all should be well.
Yeah, this is really cool because I think in other frameworks that I've tried, agent frameworks, they will make the MCP tools that come from the servers as an immutable object. So you couldn't even remove the tools that you didn't need. So I feel like that's like an advantage of using Mastra. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we just give you, the MCP client just gives you an object back, and you can do whatever it's in JavaScript, you can do whatever you want with that object. One of the pros and cons of JavaScript.
Could you go as far to change the tool's functionality if you wanted to?
I mean, in theory, yes. I mean, ultimately, you could change the properties of how those tools are passed in, but then it would not necessarily work And you'd like, if you do change the properties, you're going to get type errors. So TypeScript's going to probably shout at you and say this isn't actually a valid tool, because you do need one of the other benefits of TypeScript, which is, again, not, you can do a lot in JavaScript. TypeScript tries to add guardrails around what you can do to make it, more strongly typed. It would probably tell you, it would yell at you and say, like, you can only pass valid tools into the agent. And so then it most likely would not work. But you could probably customize, like, you could rename the tool if you wanted to. Like, maybe, the name needs to be different, or you could probably change the description of the tool if you wanted to, which again does allow flexibility, though, if you are trying to get, if your agent's having trouble calling the tool, if you could override some of those things. Type validation failed. Can you give a couple clicks of zoom so it's a little easier for us to read that? So it's like the agent is not passing in the right arguments. Expected a string, received undefined. Path is language. So it's like it's basically saying either it needs that tool requires you to pass in a language parameter, and maybe that's not clear. Have you seen this one before?
I haven't.
If you click that little drop down next to YouTube search videos, let's take a look at it. Okay, it doesn't. Let's try to run it again and just see if it consistently gets that same error. Interesting. Because it's almost like the so what it's doing, if you were to look under the hood, I guess here's one way to test. On the right side, let's test, or let's click on YouTube search videos in that right sidebar in the tool list. And so can we fill this out and see what gets returned by this tool? It looks like it did work. So we're testing the tool in isolation and it's working. But our agent, when it tries to call the tool, it's not working for whatever reason.
Yes, I thought the error was about the transcript one. So it gets the video and then it wants to get the transcript of the video.
Okay. I see. So it's after it gets it's supposed to pass the URL in, but it's not passing in English. It's almost like it's not defaulting or something. If you told it to get it in English, is it smart enough to then work? Out of curiosity?
Like in the system prompt or in the user?
Yeah, like when you talk, because you say what was your query or your prompt? How
can I clean my bike?
How can I clean it? Like, please, yeah, and then maybe just say, like, please give it to me in English or something. Just out of curiosity. Nope, it's failing on that tool.
Which is interesting because it's the same tool. I just the way I'm passing into the agent's different. That's in theory, like that's all that's changed, but like maybe I did something in the process of making the code change.
Yeah, well, I guess so if we go back though let's go back to that tool on the right sidebar and let's click on that transcript tool and let's just see if you paste in. Are you able to get the video ID, or otherwise we could probably log it out. Or if you go to get agent again. Yeah, your GCN, sorry, bike maintenance agent. Yeah. And if we were to ask the question again, we should be able to see the tool result and it should give us that YouTube URL, right? In this, if you click the little caret there once it comes back. I don't see why it seems like it stopped working.
I think something with the server.
Yeah, maybe try just a dev, just restart the dev playground once. Okay, now if we expand that, and if it's going to be hard to see, it just gives us the ID, it looks like.
I'm not sure. Oh, we want the URL, I think, right?
Yeah.
That's the...
Yeah, we're going to need the URL, which maybe shows up there. It's not the easiest to see, huh?
Oh, here we go.
No, that might be that's the thumbnail image.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we could figure out what a YouTube video, it's like /v/ID, I think, is typically what it is.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. Because I think the ID was back over here.
Yeah, I can figure out what the pattern is. If I go to, all right, so it's www.youtube.com/watch $V equals whatever the ID is. So HTTPS, yeah, www.youtube.com/watch.
/watch/V.
And then $V. $V equals, yeah. No slash after watch. Yep. And then if we were to put EN, maybe just copy that so we can get it, that ID, that video link back.
Yeah.
If you put EN and hit submit, do we get the tool call?
Yeah, it works.
So it works. And then I'm imagining, so the agent's trying to call it without passing in the EN. My thought is it's thinking that it defaults EN, meaning that if you don't pass it in, it would default. I almost wonder if you pass in like JA on that, does it work? Language not available. But if you go back to your agent and you ask it to give you it in Japanese, I wonder if it will not return that same type error.
Interesting. Okay, let's try it. Oh, I had to jump to another meeting. I just realized.
Yeah.
But this was fun though. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
working with this with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll have to get it figured out. I know you got to jump, and we'll try to report back. I'm assuming it's just the agent miscalling the tool. But great chatting with you. Great learning a little bit about trying to make our agents calling MCP tools a little bit more secure. We'll see you next time, Allie.
Awesome. Thanks, Shane.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to AI Agents Hour. We've talked about some news in AI. We've done generated some videos with VO3. We talked with the hackathon winners from the Master.build hackathon last week. We talked with Jeff from Knock around how they're thinking about agent tools with notifications built on top of Knock, and how they're building and, I guess, making notifications easier for agents. We talked with Allie a little bit about security, thought about how MCP can be maybe not always secure depending on how you're doing it, and talked about ways you can make it slightly more secure. And next, we're going to talk with Chris from Launch School. So I'm going to bring Chris on, and we're going to talk a little bit about, get a little background on Launch School, which I can share some personal stories, and then happy to learn a little bit about how they're thinking about AI in education. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, how's it going, Shane? Good to be here.
It's going well. It's going well. So I have not met you before, but I do know quite a few people that have gone through Launch School because I've honestly hired a few of them. So
Yeah, we have some mutuals, I think,
Yeah.
and it goes all the way back from the original like Gatsby to Netlify, now to Mastra. It's pretty interesting to see that journey and all the people that we know in common.
Yeah, I want to say I would guess that Gatsby hired 4 or 5 people through its course of its existence from Launch School. I would guess. I think it's right, or maybe even more. At least 4.
I think more. Yeah,
At least
it
4,
feels-
but it might be like 5 or 6.
And then Netlify separately hired a big handful as well. So once they merged, it was a good time.
but yeah, Chris, maybe can you give the audience a little introduction to you and then what Launch School is?
Sure. So I'm a longtime software engineer. Started my career out in 2002. Did the whole enterprise Java thing for a bunch of years. Got bit by the startup bug. Went and tried to do my own startup. This is like mid to late 2000s, I guess. Late 2000s, 2008, 2009. Almost thought we were gonna go, and as most startups go, it sort of petered out a little bit. And then went back into the workforce and eventually found myself getting poached over to Silicon Valley. Just at that time, I was like 10 plus years into my career. So being like an engineering manager, running teams, and just having great trouble hiring people. And so started dabbling into like training, just internal to the company. And then that morphed into just training everyone, because at the time it was sort of the rise of the coding boot camps and all that. And so we get clumped into the coding boot camp space a lot because we target similar sort of students, I guess, the career transitioners, mid-career transitioners. But we're very, very distinctly different from the bootcamp model in that we're the only ones that take a mastery-based learning or competency-based learning model. So most of our students will take years to finish our program, at least 1 year, sometimes over 3 years to finish our program. And it's sort of like the martial arts, like getting a black belt. You walk in, you get a white belt, and then you get a, what is it, like orange or yellow, orange, green, brown, black, brown, blue, black, right? You progress through the belts, the colors, and how you progress is through a test of competency at each step. And so if you don't pass that test, you just like go back to the white belt corner and just keep practicing. And then if you do pass, you get shifted to the yellow belt corner and you practice with the yellow belts, and so on and so forth. So that's exactly how our program operates. So our entire curriculum is in sequence and gated. And so it's not like a place you log into and you have access to a buffet of courses and you can take whatever course you want. Ours is mandated sequence, kind of like the belts. And there's a pretty rigorous assessment that you have to pass each step of the way. So if you can finish this entire curriculum, you get a black belt at the end, right? You have some level of competency. And to me, black belt doesn't prescribe a ceiling; it prescribes a floor, right? So like, there's different degrees of black belts, but at least you wouldn't say like, can a black belt do a roundhouse? Like that would be expected, right? So like the fundamental attributes of that skill set, you would assume this black belt knows how to do very well, and that's just kind of the sort of graduates that we produce. That there's a very, very high floor, and they're ready to sort of progress through their career, do quote unquote just-in-time learning, as we call it. So mastery-based learning is what we're known for, and I think why students come to us. And I think there's also a little bit of self-selection that like people who are drawn to this methodology tend to be a little bit more studious-minded instead of being like, how do I just get a 6-figure job ASAP, right? Like we don't have that type of student body. So it's been really fun, really good. I've been doing it for, gosh, like 12 years now. It's pretty long time.
How many people go through Launch School or are going through Launch School right now?
So we have a pretty large free program as well. We've also written a lot of books over the years. We have like 17 books that's totally free. That's used by like computer science departments, other boot camps. So if you count like the free, I think we have over 500 students, maybe more, that are going through it at different phases. So from like our what we call our preparatory courses that are free, to the core curriculum. And so yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Like, so some of you, if you have been watching this live stream for a while, you've seen Daniel on this stream. He's a product of Launch School. So we have one working at Mastra right now. I am definitely curious how. So this is called AI Agents Hour, where we like to talk a little bit about AI. I'm curious. I do have some education background. I used to teach tech camps for kids, mostly like kind of school aged all the way up through like middle school, like early high school. And we would teach computer programming, design, game design, things like that, mostly in like summer camps and weekend workshops. However, this was way before AI, was normalized. And I am curious, like, how has that affected your curriculum, your judging your mastery levels? Because it feels like it's, there was actually, a startup that's all about like helping kids cheat. That was like their startup, and they
Yeah.
got a lot of publicity around that, of course,
They got a
because
lot of funding recently too, I think.
yeah, exactly. And so, how do you think and wade through these problems where, it could be a real problem, but it's also like these are tools that people are going to be using. So how do you evaluate that as you're thinking through and making decisions in your program?
Yeah, it's really interesting time right now for us. So I've, my career sort of divided in half from being a software engineer to, I don't even consider myself an educator. I think I still take that like software engineering mind to education as a process. So it'd be like an education engineer, right? Because I'm so like process driven when I come to when I think about education. But it's really interesting because AI is affecting both of these things. We're at the cross section of education and software engineering, and AI is revolutionizing both. And I've been tracking it, for year and a half now, and 2 years now, and we've been working on a lot of internal tooling, and it's starting to show in our curriculum. So we're in our mastery-based curriculum. So we have a homegrown app that we built over the last 12 years because we're software engineers. We like to build things, and I regretted it for the longest time that we have this like homegrown app. Like, why didn't we just use an off-the-shelf tool? But no, we had to build this whole thing ourselves. And I love it now because we can inject AI into places wherever we want because we have the code base. And so we call our AI LS bot, for Launch School Bot. And where we're seeing the most benefit is where we're able to introduce it where our human staff cannot be. So I'll give an example. So we have oh gosh, I didn't even count, like maybe like 30 courses or something, I forget, across 3 language tracks. And we have thousands of exercises as well. And so through our language tracks, we have assignments, and we allow students to submit for code reviews on these assignments because they're larger. And so our TAs will, give them a code review. But we say specifically, like, we can't code review exercises because there's like hundreds and there's thousands of them. And so our staff, we just can't. And by the way, we charge $200 a month. Depending on where you are in the world, that might sound really, really high. But at that price point, we just can't code review all the things that people might want a code review for. And so we've explicitly said exercises is not something our staff can code review. Sorry about that. We just can't do that at our price point. But these assignments we can. So we put LSBot now to give automated code reviews for our exercises, and people love them, right? And we give the optionality of people asking for LSBot code review for our assignments as well, and people love them as well, especially for those who are in a different time zone, right? So we have worldwide student body, we're online only. We have a lot of students in Asia who, or Australia, who have to wait like 12 hours at least for our TAs to pop online to give them a code review. And so now they will ask LSBot for a code review, get that immediate feedback, make some changes, and then go ahead and ask for that human code review, right? Get that low-hanging fruit changes and ask some of the tougher questions, maybe the human TAs. So what I found, it's been a very complementary process. I think a lot of people just, when they think about AI, they just think like, well, AI, I don't want to learn from an AI. I don't want to, I don't want to interact with AI that much. And what I found is there's great complementary forces at work. And I think education is just a very, very hard and awkward thing. And it's all about like people being motivated. And what I found is people are more motivated when they're in a community, when there's other humans around, they're learning for a human reason. And so we have a lot of like subgroups within Launch Group, little study groups that form naturally, and they kind of motivate each other. So like sometimes you can't show up for yourself, but you don't want to disappoint your study partner. So you show up and join your study group. And that's a great motivational hack. And I want to keep that. I don't think you will feel the same if you have AI study partners, right? And you say, well, yeah, show up 30 minutes late. I don't care. So, so there's an element to like human-based learning that is so important to our motivation, because education is just not a natural thing. People are like, most people are not naturally motivated all the time. So you rely on other humans to help with that. But where I think LSBot has been very useful for us so far is just those gaps where our human TAs cannot be, for those times when there are no humans around, because you're one of the few students in Australia, for example. So that's been very, very good for us. And I think also what I noticed too, it's really interesting. There's a sort of a divide. Some people are very suspicious of AI as a whole. So, we still have our human TA, so it's not like they don't have that anymore. But part of the reason for introducing LSBot into the app is that people will run into it. And because I want people to get used to it. I feel like this is where like the younger generation don't have that problem of like resisting new things. Right. So
I think by definition, typically younger seems to be a little more anxious to adopt the new things before, as you get older, you kind of, I don't know, you start to feel a little bit more set in your ways, and you have the nostalgia of the way it was. And so maybe it's a little harder to
right.
be comfortable with trying something new or adopting something new.
Right, for sure. So there's a hesitancy there, and I think it's not completely unwarranted, because we're learning programming. And so like we don't, for example, at least not yet, and not at this moment, we don't recommend people use coding like Copilots or Cursor or anything like that. We want people to manually type out code and still use their brain to process the code. So in the core curriculum, we want people to do this manually. Use the AI, LSBot, to get code reviews and get help, but not for coding up the problem. Still to train the brain, your own brain, to get in the habit of solving hard problems. When you go to work, you may rely on the AI to do that. It's like using a calculator, but it's okay to also memorize a multiplication table, right? It's okay to do math manually, even if later on you're going to use tooling. Like our dev team, our internal dev team, we all use, I should say all, but most of us will use like Cursor or something like that. But in the curriculum, we at least right now, we don't tell people to use that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, I can go both ways, and I see the value of both, which is why it's very interesting to hear your perspective, because I do agree that if you never face hard problems, you're going to get further on than you're actually comfortable solving. You're going to get, because the Cursor agent, Windsurf agent, GitHub Copilot, whatever is going to get you so far. And then you're going to get into a really deep and gnarly problem that you are not equipped to actually be able to solve. Mm-hmm. I think that happens with a lot of junior developers, junior engineers, when they're using these tools, is they feel like they're, they got rocket boosters on their back. They can move so quickly and they're getting all these features shipped, but then they run into something and the agent spins in a circle and it doesn't get, it's either like they're not understanding that it's going off the rails and they can't catch it because they don't have the context of being able to understand what the right solution probably is. and be able to like correct it. And so they spend a lot more time than if they would have just probably like really got a deep level of understanding. I think that's that's the, you know, the one side of it. The other side is also you can now move so much faster. And the argument that I see on the flip side is maybe in the future you don't have to have that level of knowledge, or, you know, just like you don't necessarily have to memorize the multiplication table these days because you have a calculator everywhere you go on your phone. Now you could argue that there's still probably value to do that. Like I agree with that, but I think there are some people that would say like you don't really need it. And as models get better, maybe you no longer need, just like today, you know, I took a class in college on assembly language, but that's not something that I need to use today, right? I don't think about that, but at one point you absolutely had to. So it is kind of an interesting, like where I see perspectives from both sides. And so it's interesting to hear your perspective. I think we're
Yeah.
pretty well aligned, but I've definitely heard other people on kind of the other end as well.
Yeah, and that's why I say not yet, just because the field is so fast moving at this moment. And but I think that as AI gets better, where I feel the most utility for it is in giving us options, saying, you know, this or that. You can do this or that. I don't know if you watch Star Trek, but like it's like Geordi, like the awesome engineer, going to Picard. Whoa, we can, you know, overload the, you know, this, and we can do that. And Picard be like, option A, right? So we all want to be Picard. And we want AI to be Geordi, the engineer, to give us the options. But in order to make good trade-offs and make a good decision on all those options, is that you need to have great intuition. You need to have great pattern matching based on your prior experience.
Yeah.
And where do you get that? You know, if you don't have great intuition, then how do you make these choices? And I think that's hard, right? And I think this the fun part of everything we do is like having agency, right? So well, AI can do it all. It's like, well, I'm gonna go work on something else where there's like I get to have some agency, right? It's not just about like winning. If you're a bench player and you win a championship, you're like, great, but I didn't play a minute. You know, you want agency in this decision making process. And at some point, I think we're all going to like move to problems where you have some agency, and the agency is about decision making, and good decision making comes from having good intuition. So at least for the time being, having good intuition about just the smaller problems that one might face when they're coding a function, and then coding a larger, you know, several functions that interact together, and then moving it to like classes and objects, and then moving it to services and apps, and just having like slowly building up the intuition and mental model of how different components interact with each other at different layers of abstraction and complexity, I think informs one's intuition, so that when the AI builds stuff for you, you can say, oh, I prefer this over this. Right. And this is, I think, one distinction between like junior and senior engineers is that, or more experienced engineers, is that junior engineers don't have a lot of opinions, which is good because they're moldable, you know, you can shape them. But at the same time, if we're saying, well, AI has they're all junior engineers, well, then you need people with like the value is all of a sudden people who have some opinions about things, right? Have intuition about how things should be. So, at least for now, I think one of the few ways to bootstrap that is to have this like manual approach to putting all this information into your head.
Yeah. Yes. And I will say, you know, this, you know, with the caveat that as models get better, maybe this does change over time. But where we're at now is I always, and I said this earlier on the stream, so, you know, apologies for those watching who hear me that use the same reference again. But I like to think of, you know, LLMs as kind of like your eager intern, right? These agents are kind of like an eager, they're like a junior developer themselves in a lot of ways, maybe that with more technical knowledge, but less contextual knowledge. It's like they're very smart, but they have a wide grasp on like all the different things you could possibly do, but they have less context of what kind of problem we're actually solving. So in that case, they're very often not going to lead you in the right way. And if you don't ever gather that that kind of ground yourself in that decision making where you can pattern match and see where this, you know, eager intern or this, you know, more junior developer with a lot of technical skills but not a lot of context could go wrong, it's really hard for you to like be able to identify that. And you can go you can get pretty far along, and I've seen people like blow away huge features of their app, and they're not using version control, and they're like, oh no, I don't know how to go backwards. And so
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I've also found that typically, the engineers that have the best grounding in like how to act, like typically the best engineers I've seen that have adopted AI tools are multiple times better than
Mhm.
a junior engineer with an AI tool, right? So it's not like the junior engineer might be 5x faster in certain things, but that senior engineer is 10x, right? Because they know how to stop it when it's going wrong, and how to when it's not going to work, and they just have to do it themselves. Because they have that level of experience. So I do agree with you. I think there's definitely where we're at today with the state of the models, having that grounding in reality of like real world experience of seeing the hand debugging these errors, fixing things themselves, maybe using the tools here and there, like to understand how they work, but spending the time to actually
Yeah, and we're not talking about like if you talk about a career, I mean, we're not talking about a decade of that. We're talking about like months, right? Spend a
yeah,
month understanding this thing. Sometimes when I try to convince people of this, it's almost comical. I'm like spending a month on learning SQL, like is that a price too high? Or a month learning SQL, it's like you don't need to learn SQL. But we're just talking about a month here, and we're talking about a career here, right? And we're talking about like these products that you want to build that are going to have high impact, because everyone's like, I can build an AI thing, it's going to have great impact. I'm going to make $1 billion. Okay, but also you can spend a month learning SQL then, right? So it's I think the longer term you think in terms of your career, the easier this conversation is, versus if you're like, I just want to vibe code product ideas. Like I'm at the core product idea person. I'm not really interested in like understanding the technical details. I just want to like vibe my ideas out. I think that's totally fine, right? Just like go for it, and you don't need to take our curriculum. Right, but it's almost like what I always say is like we're trying to train people that want to work for you, Shane, right? Not
Yeah.
so that's a different level of like understanding that you would expect.
Yeah, exactly. I do think you're going to better be able to communicate with the tools if you understand how, at a surface level, like, or like under in the weeds of how something should be done. If you could design it out in your manually, you're going to be able to get the AI agent to do it at a higher quality, faster. So I do think like getting a grounding in real principles before you spend, you just turn it over to the AI tools and hope for the best. But I do think AI is very good for rapid prototyping, throwaway prototypes. But if you are if you really want to be a good software engineer, you still to this day you have to learn the foundations.
Yeah, and I think for another part of just the core curriculum, when I think about it, is just like getting people to not be afraid of it. It's not. I think some people, especially I feel like the more thoughtful people, are like turned off by the hype, by the breathless hype that's always out there. And to some degree, the hype is like necessary to, if you need to get funding and stuff like that. So I was just like in tech, just like you have to kind of like get used to that. We're always hyping something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it's crypto or Web 3.0 or 2.0 or something.
AI,
Or AI,
agents, money flows with the hype cycles for sure.
100%. And so you can't get like too turned off by that if you want to try to be in tech, and just have to like be aware that's what the industry is, and it's fun, have fun with it, right? But also like find utility in things, versus like like getting too exasperated with it. There's obvious utility with even the current models. Even if they don't improve at all, there's some obvious utility, and
Yeah.
just trying to find great applications of them, right? But you can see there's at minimum incremental improvements that can even bring even more utility. And in the high end, there can be great leapfrog in technology that can give us even more benefit. So just think about how to apply it. And I think that's what I'm trying to LSbot. That's why I think the younger generation is actually going to be, I think just have an easier time with the transition, quote unquote. It won't even be a transition, right? They'll ask ChatGPT, They'll ask AI for help for code reviews. What we're trying to introduce as LSBot into our curriculum, I think will probably be the default going forward, starting from a young age. So for good or bad, but I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome, Chris. Well, where do people go if they want to learn more?
Yeah, just launchschool.com. We've been around for quite a bit. We have a lot of free stuff. So if you're into free books, if you're into free courses, check us out. Yeah, we have a lot of good introduction to programming books that even computer science departments use and things like that. So I sometimes get emails like, what's wrong with this? My teacher told me this. I'm like, who's your teacher? They're like, oh, I'm at some university. So books on Git, books on Python and JavaScript and things like that.
Very cool. Well, appreciate you coming on, Chris. It was nice, I've heard about you, but it's nice to actually meet you, in public, I guess.
Yeah, likewise.
Learn a little bit more about the curriculum at Launch School, how you're thinking about AI, how you're using AI, internally, which, we use Git pull request review bots as well. So it's a very common, I would recommend everyone should be doing it, at least having that opinion, so you can get the first pass, and then you maybe still want the human curated pass as well. But definitely interested, was interesting to learn more, and happy to chat. And yeah, we'll talk to you again soon.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
See you, Chris. All right, everybody. That's it for today. This was AI Agents Hour. We kind of ran out of time to run some more videos, but if you have videos you want to see through VO3, send them my way. DM me on Twitter. I'll run some and we'll show some tomorrow. Well, maybe not tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be able to join the live stream tomorrow. So small housekeeping. I might not be here tomorrow, but Abby should be. I think we're going to have Ward from the team as well. It's going to be earlier than normal because they're in EU time zone. So it's going to be early for some of you. Means you might have to watch the recording if you normally watch it at this time. We'll be back to the normal time next week on Tuesday, because Monday's a holiday. So we won't have a live stream on Monday, but on Tuesday we will, and we'll have a normal, Tuesday through Friday, normal timing for the live stream. Every day it's around noon Pacific most of the time, and except the few exceptions that it's not. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we will